Good morning, everybody. In this video, we are going to look at some of the billing and financial aspects. Now, even though this is actually section 3 of the document, it feeds into step 4, which we will discuss in the next video. We start by introducing the fact that embedded generation has an impact on the finances of the distributor, and then discuss the impact specifically in terms of tariffs, metering and billing, and budgets and quotes. So embedded generators do have an impact on the financial situation of a distributor. One of the primary reasons is that the generator is a customer of the network and not an electricity customer anymore. So the distributor does not become the electricity provider anymore. They are now a network service provider. This is impact in terms of additional resources that are required, both in terms of human resources to do the extra work, as well as network infrastructure to accommodate these new generators. So additional tariff structures are going to be required, both in order to recover from the prosumers as well as to compensate any generation. These would typically be once-off tariff designs, which can be updated annually in terms of the normal tariff principles. So what new tariff structures are required? Well, firstly, feed-in or export credits, and these are primarily for prosumers. Feed-in can be for a pure generator, but these would typically be based on a power purchase agreement, which is not part of the tariffs. Wheeling tariffs are more of a use of system tariff, because the customer doesn't sell the electricity to you or buy it from you. He really only uses your system. All of these can be based on avoided costs as the primary factor to determine them. Also, for prosumers, the basic charges have to be unbundled from the tariffs as they stand, so that you have a true cost reflective tariff and not make a loss because of the reduced consumption from these prosumers. Further considerations in terms of tariffs are increased operational expenses, primarily due to increased manpower in maintenance, protection and power quality, and even additional equipment, as well as deep network charges. Now, these relate to equipment that has to be installed or network strengthening that has to take place to accommodate a large number of new generators, and these cannot be attributed to any specific generator. So they strengthen the network as a whole. Usually there is a benefit for the entire network, so your existing customers would also derive benefit from it. So these charges needs to be included in the tariffs for all the customers. Very often the larger customers who install these large generation systems would already have 4-quadrant metering in place. These are modern smart meters that can measure both import and export, both the active and the reactive power, because these large customers have complex tariff structures. It would be important that these meters can also do time of use tariffs, since for generation you really need to have a time of use tariff, including the feed-in tariffs. As was mentioned previously, if a customer installs the generator only for self-consumption, and they will never export to the grid. You can ensure that they keep to that promise by installing export blocking, and then you can delay the installation of a 4-quadrant meter if the customer does not have one already. Now, there is no South African standard for export blocking, but the British Engineering Recommendations G100 does contain export blocking specifications. Even with the installation of export blocking, it is recommended that export be monitored. It is known that in some cases the export blocking is installed incorrectly and the customers do actually export. Connection charges could be a standard connection fee, and that covers the manpower in dealing with this, but can also include the costs of upgrades to the network that are dedicated to the specific generator. Appendix A of the guide document contains the table with 2022 costs for several equipment that would be used when there is network strengthening. The equipment that's required would be based on the outcomes of the grid impact and strengthening studies. And as a whole, the principles of NRS 069 should be used when determining these connection charges. So standard dedicated costs would be the costs that are applicable to almost every generator. These generally refer to metering and related equipment, especially if the correct 4-quadrant meter isn't installed. And the connection works, which specifies that equipment that is necessary to connect the generator to the distributed network, as well as the associated services, getting the protection set up and communication controls, aspects such as those. When compiling the cost estimate letter, the following information needs to be included: the name of the project, size of the project, the proposed connection point, even if it's different from the application form, what is the outcome of the grid impact study, and then what is the proposed solution. So what will the generator have to do in order to connect? What is the estimated cost for this proposal? And note that this is non-binding. The cost estimate is provided as part of the feasibility checks for the generator. Along with the cost estimate letter, the selection of agreements should be provided, at least the connection and use of system agreement. The budget quote process follows a very similar process to the cost estimate, except that the equipment that needs to be added is now based on full grid strengthening studies. So the final cost estimate from the budget phase has a higher accuracy than the cost estimate. In terms of the cost estimates and the budgets, important policies are who pays for what. So what is regarded as shared costs and what are dedicated costs, as well as what is the policy on the reservation of capacity. So if the customers receive the cost estimate or the budget quote, what must they do in order to ensure that they can get that allocation and it doesn't get taken by another generator? Embedded generators have an impact on the distributor financial situation. The two key aspects to consider are developing distribution use of system charges, as well as recovering the costs from additional infrastructure that may be required to connect larger generators. These impacts were discussed briefly in terms of tariffs, budgets and quotes, as well as the metering and billing requirements that are additional. We will discuss any questions and comments during the Q&A session. If you have not done so, take a minute and jot down the questions you have. Also look for additional information under the Materials tab and prepare for the quiz at the end of the day.